Our first presenter is no stranger to us, as I said earlier. Delia McDaniel is a 49-year-old woman. She was born in Kingston and attended Arden High School. She's a registered pharmacist, graduating from pharmacy program at CAST, now UTEC, in 1988. She has established and now manages 4 family businesses, including 3 pharmacies and a medical center. For the past 4 years, she has been a member of the board of directors for the Medical Disposables and Supplies Limited. In 1996, she completed a master's in public health at UWI. Delia has taken a special interest in HIV/AIDS since 1997. In 2000, her work was highlighted at the International Conference of HIV/AIDS in Durban, South Africa. With the help of her pharmacy team, Delia has continued to provide services to prevent and treat HIV/AIDS in Jamaica. She is the recipient of the Pharmaceutical Society of Jamaica's Community Pharmacist of the Year Award for her outstanding work in the field of HIV/AIDS. She served as a lecturer at the pharmaceutical dispensing at UTEC and also as a member of the Pharmacy Council of Jamaica. Delia holds a doctorate in public health from the University of London. She has a health columnist for the Gleaner newspaper for 5 years, until March 2012. In March 2012, Delia was presented with UTEC Pharmacy Alumni Pharmacy Maker of that same year. In 2013, she received a national award, the Badge of Honor of Meritorious Service, for her service in the field of pharmacy and contribution to public health. In that same year, she received 2 awards from the Caribbean Association of Pharmacists as the Caribbean Pharmacy Innovator. 2014, she became a certified mediator. She now mediates civil cases and dispute at the Resolution Foundation. In 2015, she became a trainee to become a sister lock consultant. Not sure I would say. In her spare time, Delia enjoys cooking, going to the cinema, traveling, spending time with her family, including her parents. She's a fashionista. She left that out, I put that in. She's married to Gary Dickson, and they have a 4-year-old son, Zachary. Ladies and gentlemen, after that wonderful introduction, please put your hands together for our very first presenter, my friend, Delia McDaniel Dickson.
Good morning, colleagues. I first of all must thank Cari-Med Limited for inviting me again to speak at one of their well-attended seminars. I need to apologize first of all that I have a throat problem. I'll be constantly clearing my throat. I'm to blame for that because I went to see my ear, nose, and throat specialist 2 years ago, Dr. Merton Smith, and he told me exactly the type of surgery that needs to be done, and quite frankly, I'm very afraid. I'm scared, so I haven't come back yet. Just bear with me with the clearing of my throat. Okay, so today we're going to look at pharmacy errors. We're going to see indemnity, malfeasance, pharmacy malpractice, and tort law. We're going to get some definitions for those. Duty of care and pharmacist liability, examples of pharmacist negligence, benefits of professional liability insurance, coverage offered by professional liability insurance, professional liability insurance as a requirement for registration, because in some countries it really is a requirement for registration, and we're going to look at it in 4 countries worldwide, and then we're going to close with the Jamaican situation. We're going to look at pharmacy errors since malpractice lawsuits are based on pharmacy errors. It is a pharmacist's worst nightmare. No one is immune. It sneaks up without warning. The pharmacist is not even aware of it during the moment of the error. Only afterwards, when the pharmacist hears about it, does the nightmare become a reality. The best case scenario is that despite the error, the patient was not harmed. In a recent claims study in America, the two most common allegations against pharmacists were wrong drug and wrong dose. Together, these two allegations comprise 75% of all lawsuits against pharmacists. And I have a doctor friend who, this is a true story. A few years ago, she was here in Jamaica. She had a patient who was a child with epilepsy, and the patient came with his mother. She wrote a prescription for the drug that was needed and handed the prescription to the mother, told the mother, you're going to need to give this to the child 3 times per day. And we can see how communication is important, because the child came back with the mother. A month later, the condition was worse. It hadn't helped at all, and the mother said, well, didn't the drug help? And the mother said, what drug? Every day, 3 times a day, I folded the prescription and handed it to the child. I gave the child the paper 3 times a day. So this is actually true. This happened. Communication, important. Many years ago, we had a pharmacist who made dispensing errors regularly. Every month or so, I found myself looking for an address in Tivoli or Trenchtown or Jonestown or Rockfort, trying to retrieve and correct her prescription errors. Every time I protested about this, she gave me the same response. Everybody makes mistakes, Miss Mac. Since everybody makes mistakes, I recently posted an invitation to Jamaican pharmacists on Facebook to tell me about pharmacy errors that they have made. Not surprisingly, I got only a few responses, since for most people, mistakes are events they would rather not think about or share. Here are the responses I received. And if you can see here at the bottom, it says this may be helpful to the prospective audience, you, as what not to do as pharmacists in situation. Prescription called for Quidex eye drops. I dispensed Ciprodex ear drops. This was when I was just starting up as a pharmacist. I picked up the error when I was filing the prescription. Thankfully, I had taken the contact details, so I called the patient and apologized and gave the correct item. I was expected to supply Cari-Med antibiotic. Instead, I dispensed Metformin XL tablets. I had to call the patient who had already reached home. She lived about an hour away from the pharmacy, and we were about to close. I had to explain what happened, apologize, and volunteer to take the correct medication to her. Luckily, I had taken the time to interact with her nicely when filling the script. She was very understanding and said she would pick it up in the morning as she worked near to the pharmacy. I could not sleep for a couple of days just thinking about it. I used rubbing alcohol to mix an antibiotic suspension. The client, a child, got it and had taken 2 doses before I realized. The child complained of stomach burn. The parent called and the error was discovered. I advised them to give milk and return the medication. The alcohol bottle was beside the water bottle on the sink with no label on it. One parent was adamant to sue, but the other parent helped to soothe the situation. Long day, constant interruptions, prescription for antibiotic. The pharmacy tech mixed the wrong antibiotic. I read the label only, and the label was correct. The child had an allergic reaction, and the mother was mad. Prescription required Martindale Vistamethasone eye drops. The other pharmacist placed Martindale Timolol on the shelf in the space where Vistamethasone should be. The pharmacy technician placed the correct label on the wrong box. The patient got Timolol for Vistamethasone. The patient's father returned with the wrong meds, and the father was in fact a prominent attorney. Nifedipine 10 milligram was prescribed. Nifedipine 20 milligram was dispensed. Good error. Patient was pregnant and had eclampsia. Her blood pressure went way up. The doctor told the patient that the increased dose saved her life. When I was informed, I nearly wet myself. And this one actually happened at my pharmacy. I was coming back from the country, driving through the junction, you know, where you find yourself doing this, coming back from St. Mary. I got a phone call that, Dr. Mark, you know, a patient just came here a while ago, a policewoman for emergency contraception, and she gone with some cancer medication. And I was like, you're serious? And the only thing that saved us is that the patient was, she used a debit card. So we were able to try to call the credit union to find out what the person's name was. They were asking me, like, why I need to know that. So of course I had to disclose that. As it turns out, that credit card was like adjudicated through a bank. So I had to call the bank to tell them the same story all over again. All I got eventually was the name of the person. Then it dawned on me that I could call the credit union itself. Not the the credit union, and I spoke to a friend. I had a friend there who was able to divulge that information. I was eventually, before I reached Kingston, able to call the woman to tell her, asking her please to carry back those medications to us. So since then, our policy is, and I would advise the same, since emergency contraception is one of the more popular items that are list 2, and that you hand it out through the pharmacy window, as you do with prescription items. From that time till now, we have been taking the name, address, phone number for every person who comes requesting emergency contraception. Indemnity is compensation for loss or damage or reimbursement. It's protection or insurance against future loss or damage. Legal exemption from penalties incurred through one's own acts or faults. Malfeasance is the doing of a wrongful act, especially by a public official. Pharmacy malpractice is also known as pharmaceutical malpractice, and it refers to a lawsuit for negligence against a pharmacy, a pharmacist, a hospital, or a healthcare provider handling drug distribution or administration. A prescription is usually filled incorrectly. The prescription errors occur when a wrong medication or dosage is given. Obviously, when the medication is consumed by the patient, it can have adverse side effects. These side effects can be immediate or life-threatening if the error is serious. A pharmacist owes a duty of care to the persons receiving her prescriptions. This duty requires the pharmacist to act competently and to fill the prescription correctly. The pharmacist must inform the patient of the medication's purpose and how it is to be administered. It's her responsibility to warn the patient of possible drug interactions and side effects that the patient needs to monitor. If a pharmacist fails in discharging any of these duties in a competent manner, then he or she has breached the duty of care. When the duty of care has been breached, then a case of pharmacy malpractice or pharmacy negligence has occurred. Liability is the state of being legally obliged or responsible or answerable. Once it is proven that the pharmacist has committed pharmacy malpractice or pharmacy negligence, then liability is imposed on the pharmacist for the consequences of the error. The pharmacist will be liable to compensate for pain and suffering, emotional distress, disability, medical care, loss of earnings, and other financial losses and expense caused by his or her negligence. Pharmacists can be held responsible or found to be negligent for committing errors that involve filling a prescription with the wrong medication, filling a prescription with the wrong dose, providing someone else's prescription to the patient, filling a prescription without clarifying an ambiguity on the doctor's prescription, giving erroneous instructions to the patient as to how they are to take the medication. That's negligence there. Compounding a medication incorrectly, failing to warn the patient about serious drug interactions, failure to warn the patient about serious side effects that may occur and need to be monitored, incorrectly labeling the medication container. Research has indicated that up to 10% of prescriptions are filled in error. This is often due to underpaid, undertrained, and overworked doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and pharmacy techs. Studies have shown that pharmacists sometimes fail to administer the correct medication and/or dosage, particularly at large and busy pharmacies. So what does the public expect? The public in general may have an expectation that if a pharmacist is negligent, then there should be some form of redress available to the user of the service and/or his or her family. One of the proofs that pharmacists are indeed healthcare providers in the eyes of the law is that they can be sued for malpractice. Liability risks for pharmacists have grown with the growth in patient care responsibilities of the pharmacist. When I was looking up these definitions, I came across BW&B Medical Malpractice Law Firm in Texas. Here's their advice to the public when asked the question about what to do if my pharmacy, doctor, or hospital made an error with my medication. The consequences of being given the wrong prescription can range from mild to severe, and in some cases can even be fatal. If you suspect a medication error was made, step 1, contact the pharmacy and let them know the mistake, as well as contact your doctor so as to minimize any healthcare risks. Step 2, gather any and all evidence to support your claim that your prescription was incorrect. That includes the names of the individuals involved, copies of the prescription, bottles that the drug came in, etc. Step 3, contact an experienced pharmacy malpractice attorney and provide the attorney with the details regarding your claim. You should contact an attorney as soon as possible to discuss whether you have a case and whether it is worthwhile for you to pursue it. Pharmacists have a legal duty to dispense the correct medication to patients. If the pharmacist gives you the wrong medicine or the wrong dosage, it is important that you take action in order to prevent the mistakes that occurred in your case from happening to other people. So, what is a tort? It is a wrongful act that results in the injury to others, for which the injured party is entitled to compensation. Pharmacy malpractice involves dispensing issues, and it falls under tort law. Right, Shireen? The 4 elements of the tort of negligence are duty. The accused owes a legal duty to the victim, which is legally enforceable obligation to conform to a strict standard of conduct. There's a breach of that duty. The accused must have broken or breached that duty. Injury and causation. The victim must have an injury, whether physical, mental, or financial. The breach of our duty was the cause of the injury to the victim. And causation doesn't have to be direct. The accused's action or failure to act can begin a sequence of harmful events that cause the injury. Damages are the result, and it involves compensation. Now, confession is good for the soul. So here's what happened to me. In 1993, I filled a prescription written by the famous Dr. Jones. Looking back at the whole thing, I hear the amens. Looking back at the whole thing now, I feel like everything went wrong from start to finish. For the younger pharmacists amongst us, there used to be a brand name for tetracycline called Laticin. Now, the doctor wrote the prescription for Rotunda Rainford. Name has been changed, obviously, as Laticin eye ointment. Now, it was written just like how you see it there. It's Laticin and the eye word together. Applied 3 times daily. The pharmacy technician who prepared the product for my inspection read the prescription as tetracycline ointment. Apply 3 times daily. That Laticin together with the eye actually looked like tetracycline. Very coincidental. And the truth be told, when I read it, the only thing I saw was the same thing. Tetracycline ointment applied 3 times per day. This was a major coincidence, as I said, tetracycline being a generic for Laticin. So I supplied the tetracycline skin ointment to Rotunda Rainford to apply to the affected area or areas 3 times daily into So she went to the doctor for an eye problem. So what did she do? She applied the skin ointment into her eyes. About 6 weeks later, I received a registered letter from an attorney in St. Thomas telling me of his intention to press charges on me for issuing the wrong drug, tetracycline skin ointment, to his client, Esmeralda Escofrey. He wanted me to supply him with the original prescription too. I retrieved the prescription from the file, and ignorance is truly bliss, because I just could not see what this man's problem was. And because of that, I was fine. The other confusing thing to me was this. I supplied the prescription to Rotunda Rainford. Why was Esmeralda Escofrey suing me? So I made the next wrong move, colleagues. I called Esmeralda's attorney for clarification. He explained to me about the medication error. So that was when the diarrhea started. But the attorney wouldn't speak to me about the issue of the patient's name. Back in those days, guys, professional liability insurance was not invented as yet. So I had many sleepless nights. Then I made another wrong move. I called Dr. Jones himself, and he explained. He said that the day following my dispensing of the skin ointment, which she applied to her eyes, she returned to him with red eyes that were burning. He explained to her what the error was and gave her a sample of the correct item to use. He thought that that was the end of the story. It wasn't. So my burning question to Dr. Jones was, how come Esmeralda Escofrey is suing me? But the prescription was written and labeled for Rotunda Rainford. He paused and expressed his anger. Esmeralda was the patient, but she asked him if she could use Rotunda's Blue Cross health insurance card. He decided to help her out by committing fraud. Esmeralda was now suing him for issuing somebody else's prescription to her. She was suing Dr. Jones as if he had made a mistake in writing the prescription. Esmeralda a Delilah. I carried the original prescription to my mentor at the time, Mr. Hugh Dickson. Is he here today? Yay. I asked him to tell me what was written on it. He said, tetracycline ointment, apply 3 times per day. It actually gave me a little comfort to know that my reading of the prescription was corroborated by a brilliant pharmacist. My next move was to visit an ophthalmologist to find out what he thought could go wrong with the human eye if you instill 1 dose of tetracycline skin ointment, 2 doses of tetracycline skin ointment in it. He never did answer my question because it was actually irrelevant. Everybody, including Esmeralda, knew that her eyes were fine. The ophthalmologist told me that if a person says her eyes are hurting her, no clinician, attorney, or pharmacist can tell her that it isn't. So after all that, 2 weeks later, the last thing I did, which should have been the first thing I did, was to get an attorney. Crafton Miller was mine. By this time, I was a nervous wreck. I remember Crafton Miller's words to me. For every evil under the sun, there is a remedy or there is none. If there is a remedy, you can find it. If there is none, then never mind it. And so, I am that pharmacist who could not find the remedy. So we did a Michael Jackson, and we settled out of court. No pharmacist goes to work assuming he or she will cause a patient harm, nor does a pharmacist go to work expecting to be responsible for a prescription error. Yet accidents do happen, which is why being adequately covered for professional liabilities is so important. Professional liability insurance provides coverage for defense costs and compensatory damages awarded in the event that the pharmacist is found legally liable. Some policies will pay you for lost wages while taking time off work to defend yourself. An extension of coverage in some professional liability policies is legal expense coverage, which is related to disciplinary hearings held by the pharmacist's licensing body. This protects the pharmacist against additional legal expense. There is something I call malpractice within malpractice. One of the worst things that can happen to a pharmacist is for you to attempt to help a patient by breaking the law, and it backfires. So you try to give a patient a prescription item without a prescription, and the patient gets more sick. What happens? So one of my colleagues in another pharmacy downtown, back in the 90s, tried to help an old man. He was coming from the country and said he needed his regular eye drops for glaucoma. He'd been using it for years. He did not have the vial and he could not remember the name. So a scenario of this one, this one, this one ensued until voila, the correct item was agreed on. 2 weeks later, the patient came back with a patch on his eye plus a letter from his attorney and informed the pharmacist that the wrong eye drop had been given. The pharmacist tried to reason with the little old man. She said, "But sir, I was only trying to help you, remember?" The one thing that resonates with me the most is what the little old man said to her. "But you never have no right to give me without the prescription." Insurance companies regard this as a pharmacist's willful violation of a regulation relating to pharmacy services. So professional liability policies usually contain language similar to the following: "We do not pay for property damage arising out of a willful violation of regulation or statute relating to pharmacy services, or a violation of criminal or penal statute or a criminal act." Punitive damages like fines or damages resulting from a criminal act, example, fraud, sexual harassment, are usually not covered. There are two types of professional liability insurance contracts which the insurer may offer the pharmacist. For each type of insurance, the claim will only be honored if the incident occurred while the insurance was in place. In other words, whether the policy pays out will depend on many things, including the period of time the policy covers. An insurance policy is typically valid for 12 months, so we would think that the period of time it covers is just 12 months. Not so. There are two ways in which an insurance policy may be written. You have the occurrence-based contracts, which pay for loss, which usually occurred during the term of the policy. If a client sues a pharmacist 5 years after the date when the alleged malpractice occurred, the pharmacist who at the time in the past, 5 years ago, had occurrence-based malpractice insurance would still be covered at the time of the lawsuit, regardless of whether the insurance was still in place. So in that little red section there, you see where the insurance was active in year 1, but even 5 or 6 years after, once the incident occurred within that year that you're insured with occurrence-based insurance, you would be covered even if the claim was made 5 years after the fact, as long as the statutes of limitations have not come. There's something called prior events coverage. So what happens if you have never had insurance and you're going to purchase occurrence-based insurance today? How would you be covered for an incident in the past? The pharmacist may purchase prior events coverage to accompany an occurrence-based policy to cover incidents that occurred before the insurance policy went into effect. A claims-made contract, on the other hand, pays for any valid claim made during the term of the policy, regardless of when the alleged incident occurred. Therefore, the policy must still be in effect when the claim is made against the pharmacist. For example, if during the term of a claims-made insurance policy a malpractice claim is made, the policy would provide protection for the insured pharmacist. However, if an incident occurred during the term of the insurance, but the claim was not made until after the expiry or cancellation of the insurance policy, the policy would not provide protection for the pharmacist. Claims-made policies, however, provide coverage for claims only when both the claim and the incident happened in the same time period when the policy was in force. Claims-made policies provide coverage as long as the insured continues to pay premiums for the initial policy and any subsequent renewal. So you have to be constantly renewing. Each succeeding year, the policy is continuously renewed. The coverage period is extended. Once the premiums stop, the coverage stops. Claims made to the insurance company after the coverage period ends will not be covered, even if the alleged incident occurred while the policy was in force. But, ladies and gentlemen, there are two exceptions. A claims-made policy will cover claims after the coverage period only if the insured purchased extended reporting period coverage, or what they call tail coverage. So if the pharmacist subscribes to a claims-made policy, he or she should maintain tail coverage after he or she ceases to practice in the event that he or she is sued. For example, after retirement. The next exception to this is when the insurer had accepted valid notification of circumstances during the policy period. So, if an incident happened when you think that there's a possibility of being sued, you would notify the insurer in writing during that policy period. It means that in the event that you are sued after the policy period ends, the insurer should accept the claim. This is especially important when you are changing insurers. And this leads me to the Brinks story. Now, we know that Brinks is not in existence in Jamaica for many, many years now. But it involves insurance, but not professional liability insurance. I'll tell you this story, ladies and gentlemen, in order to simplify the claims-made insurance cover. In 2010, I had a situation at one of my pharmacies in downtown Kingston. I was at Beeston Street, about 400 meters away from the pharmacy, when I got a phone call from a crying team member. About 4 customers had been shot inside my pharmacy. I remember running in the middle of Upper King Street to try to get to the store. Of course, there was a crowd there, so I went in and tried to help to send off the victims to KPH. That was a sad day. Tears and blood and confusion. Playing back the camera, afterwards we saw where the security company had arrived from the bank to deliver change to the pharmacy. 2 armed guards went around the back to deliver to us. 1 armed guard, armed with a shotgun, stood at the front door to look out. There were 4 persons sitting, and they were sitting in those chairs that you see right there. 2 adults and 2 school children. The guard with the shotgun adjusted his position, lost control of the gun. It hit the floor and 1 single bullet fired. That 1 bullet is actually a bunch of pellets which, when they hit the ground, ricocheted and flew upward right into the customers who were seated. The customers were injured in their hands and feet and shoulder. 1 man got shot on his cheek immediately below his eye. So back to insurance now. The pharmacy has public liability insurance, which is meant to cover the pharmacy in the event that someone is injured in the pharmacy. I called my insurance broker and he told me to send him a report on the matter because I will be sued eventually. It seems like the public liability insurance I had was the claims-made type. I wrote the letter and sent it, but I did not take him too seriously anyway, because it was the security guard that shot the people, not me. Remember, colleagues, the claims made policy can be paid out after the end of the policy year if the insurance company is notified of the circumstances during the policy period. That policy year ended, and about a year later, I received notice by registered letter of about 3 lawsuits to my pharmacy. The security company was the first defendant in the matter, and if you can't catch Kwaku, you catch him short. My pharmacy was the second defendant in the case. I called my insurance broker to tell him, and then the fight started. He said, "But Delia, I received no letter from you. You did not notify us about the possibility of a future claim within that policy year, so we can't help you." I looked through every document that I could find, and nothing was there. Oops. Toilet and tears again. Then some smart young person said, "Why don't you check your email? See if you had sent him in an email." I did, and the letter was there. The insurance broker said that the company had changed software and hardware, and so he had lost some of the email. But I showed him the proof that it was delivered. It has been 7 years now, and the case has not been called up in court as yet. So look for me in the papers, all right? While the employer may provide coverage for the pharmacist, it may not protect the pharmacist in all cases. The pharmacist should be clear about how the employer's coverage protects him or her. Often an employer's policy is designed to protect the employer's interests first. One of the primary benefits of having an individual professional liability policy is that in the event of a lawsuit, the pharmacist's insurance provider will ensure that the interests of the pharmacist are protected above all others. In addition, wherever in the country the pharmacist's career takes him or her, the policy will go with the pharmacist. Whether the pharmacist has a second job, volunteers, gives advice to a friend or neighbor, moves or changes jobs, his or her own professional policy is there to help protect him or her when providing professional services. Most commercial pharmacy policies and individual pharmacist professional liability policies adequately cover professional acts of the pharmacy and its professional employees. Pharmacists need to know, however, what to look for when purchasing insurance for professional pharmacy practice. Pharmacy owners and pharmacists should spend some time understanding their insurance policies. It may be time well spent. When purchasing pharmacy liability insurance, buy an insurance from an agent who will explain the policy and is familiar with the pharmacy profession. Look for who is insured. Usually it's found in this liability section under definitions. Look for what is insured. Find out how coverage is provided. The pharmacist's policy should say it is primary. That's a pharmacist's policy, so that it covers employees before the individual professional liability insurance policies trip in. A professional liability policy for an individual pharmacist or pharmacy technician should say that it is secondary or excess coverage. Individual professional liability policies are designed to cover only the pharmacist insured. Individual policies are usually written as secondary policies which provide coverage after the pharmacy's policy exhausts its coverage amount or refuses to cover the pharmacist. The advantage of this arrangement is that the defense tends to be more coordinated between the pharmacy and the pharmacist. Independent contractors are generally not employees and are not covered by the pharmacy's policies. These pharmacists need special coverage for both general and professional acts. So there are several state and federal laws require community pharmacies, hospitals, clinics, and long-term care facilities to carry various forms and amounts of malpractice insurance. So when I did this brief research in 4 different countries, I actually called up individual pharmacists worldwide to find out whether professional liability insurance was mandatory for pharmacists to get registered each year. And it's interesting that many different opinions came about. So some people actually thought it wasn't, when in fact it really was, and so on, as you will see. Some states require pharmacists to show proof of professional liability coverage when applying for a license to practice pharmacy. A pharmacist's policy can occasionally include limited malpractice coverage for interns, resident fellows, and pharmacy technicians working directly under the pharmacist's supervision. Despite this, student pharmacists whose rotational and postgraduate assignments involve high levels of hands-on patient care should have their own liability insurance. Pharmacy technicians in pharmacies that prepare and dispense many compounded or narrow therapeutic index drugs such as clonidine or warfarin can protect themselves by getting individually insured against malpractice. Maintaining a business requires an employer to pay premiums on several different types of insurance. Each form of business insurance protects a different business element: the employer's workers, the property, and the practices of the business. Without these forms of liability insurance, an employer is left dangerously open to lawsuits and other civil actions. And we all know about medication therapy management, which we can see the various elements here. Just to tell you that in Pennsylvania, the State Board of Pharmacy requires the liability insurance only for MTM-trained pharmacists. And of course, there is a minimum. You have to be at least insured for $1 million per occurrence or claim made. And one pharmacist said, I don't think it is mandatory. Well, I didn't get any for myself, so I don't think so, when I called him. At another pharmacy in Baltimore, the pharmacist said PLI is recommended but not mandatory. And the other one said, our coverage is through our employer. We may take out our own insurance individually, but we don't have to. In New Jersey, the insurance is optional if you want to get additional private insurance, but your employer insures you. The company that you work for in California gives you the insurance. You don't have to have it. In New York, the employer insures the pharmacist. Now, in some states, if you become the victim of a violent action at work or on your way to or from work, this coverage will reimburse you for your medical expenses, including workplace violence, counseling, or damage to your property. In some states, claims arising from allegations of slander, libel, assault, and battery, and other personal alleged injuries arising through the performance of your professional services are covered. In some states, the policy pays to defend you against allegation of sexual misconduct for amounts that you are legally obligated to pay as a result of claims involving acts of sexual misconduct related to professional services. So when you think of pharmacists in Canada, well, I think of our very own friend, Dr. Mark Wellington. I asked him whether professional liability insurance was mandatory for pharmacists in Canada. He said, as a pre-requirement for registration with the Ontario College of Pharmacists and yearly registration thereafter, you must declare on paper that you have purchased liability insurance. Based on ethics and societal norms, they do not ask you to present proof of the certificate of insurance. However, the purchase of the liability insurance is wired into the system, precluding the registration from going forward if in fact the applicant did not purchase it. Requirement in law. And we see here where the Ontario College of Pharmacists says that in accordance with the law, all members engaged in the practice of pharmacy, including students, interns, pharmacists, and pharmacy technicians, are required to maintain personal professional liability insurance. Pharmacy techs and interns, they have a system, you see, of Part A of the register, Miss Wallace. Part A, there are Part A and Part B. So the Part A is the section where you have these pharmacists who are assigned that side of the register, Part A. They do a whole lot of various pharmaceutical activities that definitely they must maintain personal liability, professional liability insurance. For Part B, it's not as stringent, I gather, because you are involved in no patient care. You cannot work in pharmacy as a pharmacist. You cannot fill in for a pharmacist. You can't provide drug information to the public, and you cannot be designated the manager of a pharmacy. So it's a little bit more relaxed for persons who are on Part B of the pharmacy register. And we're seeing here where you have the limits of liability. The policy must cover in Canada a minimum of 2 million per claim or occurrence and 4 million aggregate for the year. And they have the different definitions of insured services, and it must include all pharmacy services. You have to have prior events coverage, and you must have tail coverage for at least 3 years, etc. Went over to Grand Cayman. The Department of Health Regulatory Services has issued amongst the guidelines for you to establish a new healthcare facility. You have to show evidence of medical malpractice insurance. The malpractice insurance or indemnity cover provider must be a licensed company and be approved by the Health Practice Commission. So I called my friend Donna Goodall, who is a Jamaican. That I think she was practicing in Grand Cayman up to recently, and I asked her about professional liability insurance, and here's what she said. In Cayman, it is compulsory for the pharmacist to have malpractice insurance. Health insurance for employees is also compulsory. The the owner usually pays for the malpractice insurance and 50% of the health insurance premium, since these are requirements for the registration of the pharmacy. However, some pharmacy owners refuse to pay the premium, and the pharmacist is forced to pay it. However, the insurance is in fact a personal insurance for the pharmacist because it has the pharmacist's name on it. So I interviewed another pharmacy asking her, considering that it's a personal professional liability insurance, can you travel from one pharmacy to another with it? Freelancing is not common in Cayman due to the limited scope for it and the fact that many pharmacists are there on a work permit which ties them to one pharmacy. In the unlikely event that it is going to be done, the pharmacist must get permission from the substantive employer. If the pharmacist ceases to be employed by the substantive employer, the employer cannot terminate the malpractice insurance policy without the confirmation from the pharmacist. The insurance company will contact the pharmacist to ensure this. The insurance company is Medical Protection Society, a United Kingdom-based organization. And we see all of the accolades about the Medical Protection Society there. Over to the United Kingdom, there are 4 categories of healthcare professionals there, as we can see. And I had a little talk with Shireen Dawkins-Cox this morning about the Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain, where it was said that they could not confirm the existence of insurance coverage as a part of the registration. However, Principle 7.7 of Code of Ethics for Pharmacists and Pharmacy Technicians requires that pharmacists be insured. So anyway, I spoke with our very own Jamaican, Janet Frey. She is Vivienne Watson's sister, and I spoke with her about this, and she is one of the regional trainers in England for the healthy living pharmacy concept that is going to be a new way of working for community pharmacy there. Jamaicans are really distinguishing themselves worldwide. And here's what she said. You need indemnity insurance to register with the General Pharmacy Council. Most companies have indemnity insurance, and the pharmacist is covered as an employee, but the cover is basic. Pharmacists have their own individual insurance. The cover depends on your practice in terms of the level of risk. Community pharmacist cover would be different from a hospital pharmacy and a practice pharmacist. Also, the type of cover will depend on if you're an independent prescriber or if you administer the flu vaccines and travel vaccines, etc. I spoke with a pharmacy owner in Tudor Pharmacy in Wootton, that's in Northampton, where I like to hang out when I get the chance. She had a different idea, Shireen. She said professional indemnity insurance for chemists is not compulsory as yet, whether the chemist works in hospital or community pharmacy. However, when you're a pharmacy owner like me, you would be stupid not to have it. I have it. So, come back to Jamaica. 15 years ago, the Medical Association of Jamaica established an insurance fund, MAGIF, for special categories of persons. The insurance year runs from July 1 to June 30 each year. The MAGIF operates in the same manner as an insurance company. Firm insurance brokers undertakes the functions on behalf of MAGIF. The benefits offered by MAGIF include partial or full indemnity provided against legal fees incurred by a member and costs and damages awarded against a member, including out-of-court settlements arising from the practice of his or her profession. Premiums and payouts are in JA dollars. At MAGIF's discretion, they may extend coverage to CARICOM territories for a maximum of 90 days per year, which will attract a higher premium. Advice and assistance in relation to legal matters arising from the practice of the member's profession. MAGIF hosts risk management seminars twice per year, which are free to members and provide at least 2 CE credits. So that's something good to know. Exclusions from cover are telemedicine. MAGIF will not cover claims arising from telemedicine. Claims arising from the use of medical equipment and supplies and disposables outside of the manufacturer's recommendations, or reuse of disposables. Uninsured medical personnel working on behalf of insured members. I must add to this list of exclusions of MAGIF, MAGIF does not insure the pharmacy or the employer with the professional liability insurance. However, firm insurance brokers has a separate plan, a public liability type of insurance that covers pharmacies for malpractice lawsuits. And all members of the medical profession are eligible for MAGIF membership. All dentists, all health personnel to be defined, and pharmacy is included, and any other group of persons declared by MAJ fully compliant with relevant licensing authority in Jamaica. I was happy to speak with Mr. Adrian Smith of Firm Insurance Brokers about the type of professional liability that MAGIF offers. MAGIF offers occurrence-based insurance. They call it claim incurred cover, but it's occurrence-based. He could not remember any recent claims by pharmacist policyholders, and I wonder if this means that many pharmacists who have lawsuits here don't have insurance, so they settle out of court and remain below that radar. Pharmacy is regarded by MAGIF as a low-risk Group 4 category. They offer 2 packages up until this year, until June 30 this year. So I don't know if the cost will change, but the packages they offer have a basic rate where we pay $16,000 for the year for 5.5 million Jamaican dollars cover, or you have a level 4 rate where we pay $20,000 per year for 10 million cover. I'm just going to end by reading a sales pitch from an insurance company that does professional liability insurance for pharmacists. Your license to practice pharmacy represents a smart investment and one that must be protected. In fact, your pharmacy career depends on it. You have dedicated time, money, and a lot of yourself to succeed. Without the right malpractice protection, you're risking everything you work so hard to achieve, placing your career, your personal assets, and your family's financial future in serious danger. So why would you take the risk of practicing your profession without protecting your most valuable asset, you? My pharmacist colleagues, as we have been doing today, discussing the possibility of error can be unsettling, as no pharmacist plans to make a mistake that could hurt someone. However, that is the nature of insurance, to imagine the unimaginable.
Excellent, excellent. Can we have another round of applause for Dr. Glued to my chair. Excellent presentation, Delia. Because of the interest of time, we're literally taking 2 questions only. If there are any, is any, what any, then I see 1. I'm literally taking the first 2 that I see. You know how to use the microphone? You have one? Just find one close, don't shout. There's a mic right there. Perfect. And whoever the second person is, just think about it. All right? Come forth, Lazarus. Yes. And be bounded not.
Hello, morning, everyone. Delia, why would someone use the claims-made policy since it only covers you within that period, and if you didn't write a letter to cover you after the period has elapsed? Is it that that policy is cheaper because you'd want something, you had mentioned one that covers you, I think, up to after 5 years or up to 5 years. You have another one that is before.
Yes. The claims-made policy is definitely cheaper, and the insurance companies price it accordingly, because with the claims-made, it would have to happen within that same year. Right. Whereas if you choose not to insure in another year and then you get a claim then for something that happened in the past, then they wouldn't have to pay out. So it's priced accordingly. The occurrence base would have to cost more, which is the one we have in Jamaica, because it actually covers you so much further in the past, as long as the statute of limitation. I think it's like 7 years, Shireen? 7 years is the statute of limitation. As long as 7 years hasn't passed, you would be covered. So you have to pay for all of that coverage, all of that time.
Okay, and so the one that MAGIF has, does it cover
occurrence-based is the one that can cover you 5 years earlier or 6 years earlier.
Oh, earlier?
Yes, once you were insured in that time. Like if you were insured for occurrence-based in, say, 2010, and an incident happened in 2010, but then 4 years later is when the person is realizing that based on that incident in 2010, I have some injuries or something, and I'm going to come forward now. Then because you were insured with occurrence-based insurance way back in 2010, you would be covered now.
Right. But as you mentioned that, because that was another question, all right, we know normally after 2 years, because we are legal to keep a prescription for 2 years, now when a patient comes after 2 years, when you have discarded that prescription, how much of a proof they have that you really gave them something wrong?
That is something that we really have to look into, because we are realizing as pharmacy owners that some of the insurance companies actually require us to keep the prescriptions for 6 years. Am I right? Sagicor? Sagicor only requires that we keep it for 6 years. So it might be something that we have to start considering for our own protection until statutes of limitations can run out. I don't do it, but I'm just saying, thank you.
The MAGIF doesn't cover you for before. You have one that you had mentioned that covers you before you are registered.
Right.
So
to be truthful, a lot of the things like tail coverage and the prior events coverage and so on, I didn't get that impression, but I didn't research that far, so I can't say. But a lot of the things that, like even sexual abuse and sexual misconduct and things like those that are covered in some states in America, they don't cover it. So some of those fancy things, MAGIF does not. Because I suspect that the premium would really go much higher than it already is.
Because I think the prior one would be more, be a lot relevant to a lot of persons, because it's at that point of error that we realize that we are being sued, then we would realize that probably we need some form of coverage. So
before.
I think, yes, to cover us
Truly.
for whatever incident happened before.
It is run, for the MAGIF, by the way, we would approach PSG. PSG is the one that we would approach for if we want to log on to the MAGIF.
Okay.
We do it through PSG.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Clap her, man, she bright. All right, so I think she has used up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. So if you weren't quick on the draw, it's gone. All right.